everyone, Karen here from the Stitch Sessions. Are you guys ready for a really cool stitch tutorial? This is so neat. Sorry about the pink background, but in a moment I'm going to show you in that cream color, so it's going to show through. But I've already done this stitch in a medium 4-weight yarn, just so you can see the differences in the yarn weight and the differences of the effect you're going to get from this. This is called the Zeros and Crosses stitch. And it's a very similar take on the X's and O's stitch. So it's using a lot of cross stitches with some chain spaces. And the reason why I wanted to do this right away this week, especially after last week's tutorial. So if you missed last week's tutorial, we worked on the vintage style lamp shade, and that was August's Home Sweet Home project. And in that stitch, I used the cross stitch, and I wanted to create just a slightly lacy look. It didn't have to be truly lacy, but just enough to diffuse the light and let some light through. So when I came across this stitch, I thought, if you really liked that tutorial and you wanted to try it yourself, but maybe you want to try something slightly different, a little bit more airy, this stitch might be for you, because as you can see, it creates a much, well, not a lot, but a little bit more of an airier look. So it will allow more light to come through. So if you're curious to see how this will turn out, then stick around. I'm going to show you this stitch today. Okay, so the materials I'm going to be using, like I said, I have some left over from last week's project, and this is the 24/7 cotton yarn by Lion Brand. I love this yarn. It's a mercerized cotton. It's got a little bit of a sheen to it, but it's super strong. If you're using it for anything like home decor or things to do with the kitchen or the bathroom or dining room, like anything that's going to come in contact with a lot of heat and or moisture, I would recommend using this cotton yarn. So I have some left over here, and in case you're wondering, the color is called Ecru. I would call this kind of like a creamy color. Okay, and it is it's funny, they call this a medium 4-weight yarn, but it is very different than this yarn that is traditionally a 4-weight medium. Look at the difference there. So I'm not sure why they categorize this as a 4. I would categorize this as a lightweight number 3. And you will see the difference in how this looks once I work it up in this yarn. So just keep that in mind. And as always, for any project, make sure that you have a pair of scissors on hand, a yarn needle to weave in any ends, and a yarn needle has a larger eye there. And then for this little stitch tutorial, I'm going to be using a slightly larger hook. I'm using the 4.5 millimeter hook, which is also known as a G or a size 7. And I think this will just help me kind of show you a little bit more of the texture, but it's still going to come out looking a little bit smaller than this yarn, which you're going to see in just a moment. So let's get to it. Okay, so we're going to begin by placing a slip knot on our hook here. And the stitch calls for a multiple of 2 plus 1. And then we're going to add 3 more chains at the end. Now, I feel safe enough to say, go ahead and stitch up any odd number of chains that you desire, whatever you're making, and then add your 3 at the end of that. So that's my recommendation. Now, in this swatch, I did 12 stitches plus 1. So that was 13 stitches, and then I added an additional 3. And so just to show you exactly how the yarn weight affects each other, I'm going to do the exact same number of stitches. So I am going to stitch up 12 plus 1, which is going to give me 13. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, plus 1 is 13. And then I'm going to add an additional 3 for my turning chain to start. So we have 1, 2, and 3. So these 3 here will count as a double crochet stitch. So next what we're going to do, we're going to begin row number 1. So we're going to find the 6th chain from the hook. So Remember, we've got 3 here plus this 4th one. We skip the next one, and into the 6th chain, you will place a double crochet. Okay. So this creates a little loop like this, and this counts as a chain 1 space. So 3 of these chains counts as a double crochet, and 1 of the chains will count as a chain 1 space. Okay. So then we chain 1, we skip the next chain, and into the following one, we place a double crochet again. Okay, and now we have 2 chain spaces. We're going to continue doing this all the way to the end. We'll chain 1, skip a chain, and into the next chain, we're going to place a double crochet. Just like that. Okay, and I'm coming up to the end here, so I'm skipping this next chain and going into the very last chain here. Double crochet, and row number 1 is complete. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces and 7 double crochet stitches. So for row number 1, we technically have 13 stitches in total. Now the reason why I bring this up is because for row 2 and 3, we will have 12 stitches. But every time you come back to that row number 1, you'll have 13. So it's a funny little thing about this stitch where you're just going to alternate every few rows how many stitches you have. Now it is just by 1, so the more rows, I keep saying rounds, the more rows you do, it will even out nice and straight. So if I bring this out here, see the edges still look fairly straight for the most part, except this little one here, but that's just the X effect. Okay, so row number 1 is complete. So let's go on to row number 2. So for row number 2, we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to turn our work. And as always, this will count as a double crochet stitch. So for row 2, we're going to be doing our X's or our crossed stitch. Now, notice for row 1, this looks like our zeros or our O's, okay? So what's going to happen is we are going to skip this first chain space and work into the next one here. So we're working into the spaces, and we're going to place a double crochet. So we're going to go into that space and use a double crochet. And you don't want to be too tight, right? Just keep it somewhat relaxed. And then we are going to go back to this missed space, and we are going to double crochet back into it. So you're going to insert your hook into that space and then just go ahead and pull up a loop. Just keep it a little loose, and then pull through 2 and pull through 2. And so you've got your traditional X'd stitch. Now, I'll refer you again to last week's tutorial when I was using the X'd stitch or the cross stitch for the lampshade. I did not go forward and pull it through. I actually snuck in from behind, and that was just to create a slightly different look. So there's always ways you can adjust these base stitches to create different textures and for your liking. So again, if you haven't, you should check out that tutorial. It's one of my favorites so far this year in our Home Sweet Home series. All right, but let's stick to this for now, and let's go on and create another cross stitch. So this was the space we just worked into. So all we're going to do now is go into the following space and place a double crochet. And then we're going to come back to this space here. Now, I know we've already worked it, but the cross stitches are going to share chain spaces with each other. So I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to come back and pull up a loop and then finish my double crochet as usual. See that? So one leg of this X and one leg of this X share that space. Okay, we just worked into this one. So we're going to work into the next space right there, double crochet, so it creates a little bit of a slant, and then we come back to the previous space and double crochet. And I can't stress this enough, really try to relax those loops, because this is the row where if you are a tight crocheter, it's really going to make your work bunch up, which is not what we want. Okay, so I'm just going to finish this here with you guys. We've only got a couple more chain spaces to go. So I'm going to go into the next space and I'm going to double crochet. Then I'm going to come back to the previous space and double crochet again. That's our next cross stitch. And now we've got the final one, which we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to go into that last space and double crochet, and then we're going to come into the previous space and double crochet, just like that. Okay, and so you can see it's definitely not finished, but a lot of people might go, I don't know what to do next. So remember, we had that chain 3 that counts as a double crochet. So we are going to finish the row with a regular double crochet, and that's what's going to flank each side of row number 2. So here what we have to do is we have to find the top of the 4th chain. Remember, one of these chains counts as your end, and then 3 of them counts as a double crochet, and then 1 more counts as a chain space. So if you have a hard time, you can turn it over so you can see the front of the V. So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that is where I'm going to place my double crochet stitch. And I always try and pick up 2 loops if I can. Again, not too tight. And there you have the end of row number 2. So now you can see our row of zeros, so to speak, and then our row of X's or crossed stitch. This is, like I said, there's another stitch called X's and O's, and it's a similar take, but it's not, the difference with that stitch is it's not separated in each row. It's actually alternated between. And in fact, I do have that stitch tutorial in the stitch tutorials playlist, and I'll leave a link to that down below so you can really see the difference. Okay, so we have one more row to this repeat. We have row number 3, which is the easiest row of all. So what you're going to do is you're going to chain 1 and turn. Now I should mention that at the end of row number 2, you're going to be down to 12 stitches. So if you have the 1, then you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 with the last double crochet there. So one stitch always kind of gets eaten up in round number 2. So in round number 3, we're going to use single crochet stitches, and all we're going to do is place 1 stitch into each of these stitches. And so that means we're still going to have 12 stitches. So this chain 1 in this case will not count as anything. We are going to go immediately into this first stitch, and we are going to single crochet. And then we're going to continue placing 1 single crochet all the way to the end. And some people might call this our return row, so that we can begin row number 1 with the same side facing forward. Okay, so I'm at the end of row number 3, and now I just have that chain 3. So it's always the top of the chain 3 here that we place our last single crochet stitch. And we still have 12 stitches left. So this is what creates the full stitch, which is called zeros and crossed. And then we start again with row 1, 2, and 3. So row 3 is just, again, that return row. Now, I'm going to show you a little something here. Even though this yarn is much thinner, when I placed it here, you see, it's almost actually the same length. Mind you, I did use a larger hook size for this particular yarn. But as you can see, this is the top part of row 3. It does not sit quite as tall. So there will be a difference in effect. Look at how much smaller this looks than this. So that is it for the stitch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do several more repeats. Now here I repeated this stitch 2 times. So I did 1, 2, and 3, row 1, 2, and 3. So it's been repeated twice, so you can see I've got fairly nice square. And I'm going to repeat it several more times with this slightly thinner yarn just so you can see the effect. Now, I'm going to take you through how to begin again. So now we've got some regular stitches to work into. So you will chain 4 from now on to begin a new set of row 1. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to turn our work. So these 4 chains count as a double crochet and a chain 1, okay? And then we will skip the next stitch, and into the following stitch, you will place your double crochet stitch, okay? Chain 1, skip a stitch, and into the next stitch, double crochet. Okay, continue to repeat this to the end of your row, and keep in mind that now we are down 1 stitch. So we have an even number of stitches. So you're going to find something very interesting at the end of this row. So I'm going to chain 1, skip a stitch, and then here. So in this case, what we're going to do, this is normally would be your last stitch, but remember we did a chain 1 that I said kind of was not going to count as anything. Well, this is the moment in time where we're going to count it. So this is the actual stitch. We're going to skip it, and we're going to go over to where I did that chain 1 there. And all of a sudden, this is going to become our 13th stitch again. I'm going to pick up an extra loop here, and I am going to double crochet into that chain 1. Okay. So that brings back our chain 1 space. Now it will look slightly a little closer just because of the nature of that chain 1, but we are now back up to 13 stitches. Okay, and then you would proceed on to row number 2 as usual, chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. So for row number 1, you're always going to start with chaining 4. Row number 2, you're always going to start with chaining 3. And then you proceed with your cross stitch. So you skip this first chain space, go into the next one, then you come back and double crochet. Okay, and then you know the drill. You go into the following chain space, double crochet. Again, look at how nice and loose I keep these stitches. And then we come back to the previous stitch. Okay, then you go all the way to the end, and then remember it's the top of the 3rd chain here that you place your double crochet stitch into to finish off row number 2. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do several more repeats of this stitch just to create a slightly longer swatch so you can really see the full effect. I think you can already see just how really lacy this is, most especially compared to the stitch pattern I used for last week's tutorial. I think you'll really find it very, very interesting. Okay guys, so I have completed 3 rounds of this stitch, and this is what it looks like. So you can see it's really very lacy. So if you would use this for something like last week's project, you're going to get a lot of light coming through. And now I did use acrylic yarn here on this one. I would recommend if you're doing that lampshade project, do not use acrylic, because if you've got high heat next to it, it's probably not going to be great. So I just did it in acrylic here because maybe you want to use this for a scarf pattern or a blanket pattern. A baby blanket would be really cute in this as well. This is what it would look like. And so in this mercerized cotton, this is what the stitch pattern looks like. And even if you wanted to kind of end up turning it this way for whatever project you're using, that would look really cool with the eyelets going vertically, and then you can see the texture of the cross stitch there. Pretty neat, huh? So I hope that this gave you a little bit of maybe inspiration on different things that you can use or different types of stitches you can use. And again, I'm referring a lot to last week's video because I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with that project. But like I just said, this would be a really pretty stitch for a scarf. Actually, even if you wanted to use a fine weight like number 2, maybe even a super fine number 1, you could create a beautiful, lovely, delicate scarf with this. I think it would be super, super pretty. And you could just work it horizontally, or you could create one long chain so that you get this pretty effect of the eyelets going vertically. What do you guys think? So let me know, what are you going to use this stitch for? Are you going to try this out on that project we did last week? Or do you have something completely different that you would use this stitch for? Let us know in the comments. I know all of our crochet friends are always looking for some inspiration on things to do with these different types of stitches. So yeah, let's share with each other. So this is the zeros and crossed stitch. Whew, that's a mouthful to say. So if you're looking for something that has a little bit of laciness to it and a little bit of texture, this might be a really nice stitch for you guys to try out. Now, as always, if you have any detailed questions, you can leave them for me in the comment box down below. But you can also reach me directly, which I know a lot of you do. And you can email me at info@crochetcrafty.com. And don't forget, come check out the website. There's a lot of free written patterns on there for you, as well as a lot of cool bonus tools to help you in your crochet journey. And if you're looking for some other patterns, you can also check out my Etsy shop at Crochet Crafty Canada. And don't forget, come say hi to me. I'm on the socials. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at The Stitch Sessions. So that's it for this week. I look forward to seeing you guys again in next week's tutorial. In the meantime, I hope you've been having a really great summer, staying cool, I hope. So happy crocheting. Take good care of yourselves as always, and I'll see you guys in next week's session. Bye-bye.